Good evening. You're tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Farhana Sheikh. Bribing doctors to falsify vaccination records, MACC to probe allegations. And Malaysia, my second home, are new rules scaring off investors. That's coming up. Malaysia's Budget 2022 will focus on pandemic recovery, rebuilding of national resilience and catalysing reforms. In its first ever pre-budget statement, the Ministry of Finance also assured that the budget will leave no person or business behind in receiving government's assistance and support. The budget will be crafted on the assumption that the economy will recover from the COVID crisis next year. In the statement, it said the government is also considering ways to boost tax revenue via higher compliance. One such measure includes a voluntary disclosure plan for indirect taxes, where individuals can come forward to declare tax that hasn't been paid or underestimated. The publication of the pre-budget statement 2 months ahead of the budget's tabling in October is part of the ministry's efforts to make the annual budget preparation process transparent. Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission will investigate allegations that some quarters are attempting to bribe medical doctors to falsify their COVID-19 vaccination records. Chief Commissioner Datuk Sri Azam Baki said he views such allegations seriously as they not only involve bribery but also tarnish the reputation of the medical profession if true.
The MACC, he said, has yet to receive any reports on the issue, but will investigate and gather intelligence at locations where such misconduct is suspected. He urged the public with information on such attempts to contact the MACC through its hotline or website. The Federation of Private Medical Practitioners Associations Malaysia revealed that it had been receiving complaints from members that they were being offered up to 1,000 ringgit to falsify COVID-19 vaccination status.
Malaysia celebrates its 64th year of independence today. It is a merdeka like no other as the country battles the COVID-19 pandemic and economic crisis. We speak to Anas Zubaidi, author and managing director of Zubaidi Sendirian Berhad, on how Malaysians can emerge stronger together from the pandemic.
I think in hardship, we rise above race, location and religious affiliation, and that's the beauty of what we have discovered the last 2 years. Yeah, although there are many complaints and complainers, yeah, we remain calm. There's no looting, there's no real breaking of laws in the country. Yeah, the poor and hungry, among us, simply put, white flag, and then and people rush coming in. And this is amazing because Malaysians, even though they got no food to eat, and they are really in dire strait, they didn't become violence at all. No violence. Yeah.
Quoting Malaysia's father of independence, Tunku Abdul Rahman, Anas said Malaysians should strive to work together and live harmoniously regardless of our backgrounds and ethnicities.
Our future depends on how well many different kinds of people can live and work together. So that's Tunku. Yeah. So from the start, if we see in 1957, there was a spirit of accommodation and acceptance. Now that's our spirit, sharing and understanding, hope and optimism. Yeah. And this is the kind of spirit we must keep in our hearts and in our practice. It's like the vogue now to say that I'm Malaysian first or I'm Malay first. We need to stop pitting our ethnicity with our citizenship. Yeah, we should stop saying I'm Malay first or I'm Malaysian first or I'm Chinese first or Malaysian first. Because we should say I'm both Malaysian and Malay first. I'm both Malaysian and Chinese first. The reason being is very simple. Being a Malay or Chinese or Indian is your ethnicity. Being Malaysian, Malaysian is your citizenship. They're two different things. You can be both at the same time. You can be both first at the same time.
Anas stressed that moving forward, Malaysia should focus on 3 key areas: managing the pandemic, economic recovery and fighting corruption.
The government, the opposition, the parliament, of course, our leaders in the parliament, and all of us Malaysians, we need to make sure that we deal with COVID-19. We deal with economy, but we need to nip rasuah in the bud because that's the one that's going to kill us. That's the cancer that we have. Yeah?
This Merdeka Day, we speak to legal scholar Professor Shad Salim Faruqi, who has called for a return to the Constitution's forgotten path of moderation, compassion and compromise. That's coming up on Consider This right after AWANI Tonight. We'll take a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Malaysia My Second Home program, or MM2H, which allows foreigners to stay in the country on a long-term basis, is back after being suspended for over a year. This time with stricter rules that some say will trigger an exodus of not just foreigners, but billions of ringgit from the country. We speak to Dr. Carmelo Ferlito from Centre for Market Education to find out if the new tougher conditions bring more harm than good.
People that decided eventually to remain here after having worked as professionals for a few decades, and these people already contributed to development with their businesses by creating employment, creating business opportunities for many. But then if we look more stricto sensu to the retired people, of course these people spend their income here. So restaurants, hospitals, entertainment, whatever dollar they have is spent within the country. And of course, dollars spent in consumption means dollars that create employment. Now we have more or less 50,000 Malaysia Second Home Pass holders. So you imagine, even if they spend an average of 3,000 ringgit a month, it means that we have 150 million ringgit entering the economy every month only for the ordinary expenses.
According to Carmelo, drastic changes to the policy may turn investors and current participants away. Among the new conditions stipulated, participants must stay a minimum of 90 days in the country per year. No minimum stay was needed previously. They must also have a monthly offshore income of at least 40,000 ringgit, up from 10,000 ringgit before. Participants must now have permanent savings of at least 1 million ringgit and a declaration of liquid assets of at least 1.5 million ringgit. The visa's validity have also been cut from 10 years to 5 years.
So somehow Malaysia is sending a message that foreigners are less welcome than what they were before. And this is particularly dangerous now because we are in the middle of a process of multinational companies reshuffling their presence in the region, in particular companies that are moving out from China. And we have countries like Indonesia, then in example, are instead trying to facilitate the arrival of foreigners in the country.
Since the program was introduced in 2002, nearly 50,000 foreigners have been granted MM2H long-term passes, one-third of them from China.
Considering this as a natural program for long-term expatriates. So, to obtain a PR status in Malaysia is pretty complicated. So expatriates that look at really a long-term solution, even beyond their employment status, they may find very difficult to remain here. So if we don't want to allow long-term expatriates to become PR, why don't give them a more automatic process to convert their employment pass or their talent corp pass into a second home pass. This, I think, is something that is worth exploring.
The last U.S. flight left Kabul airport in Afghanistan, marking an end to America's longest war. The last C-17 aircraft took off with the U.S. ambassador on board after midnight local time on Tuesday.
Shortly after their departure, Taliban fighters streamed into the airport to declare victory and claim disabled military equipment left behind by the U.S. Celebratory gunfire by the Taliban was heard after the last plane departed. With the Americans gone, there is widespread anxiety about what the hardline Taliban government would look like. The U.S. said it had evacuated about 123,000 civilians, including 6,000 American citizens, in what was its largest non-combatant evacuation in history. It said that the diplomatic mission to assist those unable to leave before the August 31st deadline would continue.
Washington has suspended its diplomatic presence in Kabul and shifted its operations to Qatar. Speaking hours after the withdrawal, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken left open the possibility of the U.S. resuming some level of diplomacy with the Taliban. This will depend on how they conduct themselves in establishing a government in Afghanistan and adhering to the protection of human rights.
Every step we take will be based not on what a Taliban-led government says, but what it does to live up to its commitments. The Taliban seeks international legitimacy and support. Our message is any legitimacy and any support will have to be earned.
The last U.S. military aircraft's departure was the final chapter in a contentious military effort, which eventually saw the U.S. handing Afghanistan back to the militants it sought to root out when American troops entered the country in 2001.
Singapore will send 500,000 doses of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to Australia this week as part of a dose-sharing agreement. Under the deal, Australia will send the same quantity of vaccines back to Singapore in December, when Australia is expected to have ample supplies.
According to Singapore's Foreign Affairs Ministry, the 500,000 doses that Singapore is sending will come from its existing stock, and the country has enough to meet its current needs. The vaccine swap arrangement would help Australia accelerate its vaccination program. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the additional doses would enable Australia to bring new groups into the vaccination program, including 12 to 15-year-olds. Only 34% of Australia's target population was fully vaccinated by this week.
South Korea has become the first country in the world to pass a law to ban App Store operators from forcing software developers to use their payment systems. The move is one of the first major power checks on big tech companies like Apple and Google.
This means that developers can avoid paying commission to Apple and Google by directing users to pay via alternate platforms, effectively threatening Apple and Google's lucrative commissions, which is as high as 30% in every transaction. Some 180 lawmakers out of 188 voted in favor of the bill, also known as the anti-Google law. It can be referenced by regulators in other places, such as the EU and US, that are also scrutinizing big tech companies.
That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news update on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and the Astro AWANI app. I am Farhana Sheikh. Selamat Hari Merdeka and we'll see you again.